clase. Today we are going to talk about subject pronouns and the verb ser. So what is a pronoun? A pronoun is something that takes the place of or refers to a noun. A subject pronoun functions as the subject of a sentence. So once you see the chart, I think this will make more sense to you. So here we have first person, second person, third person, singular and plural in English. I, you, he, she, or it, we, you, they. Looks familiar, right? In Spanish, these are the subject pronouns that you will have to learn. Yo, tú, usted, él o ella, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, ustedes, ellos, ellas. So it's just a matter of memorization. So what does first person, second person, and third person mean? First person is when you are referring to the speaker themselves. So in English, you would say I or we. Second person is the person that you are speaking to. So you in English. If you're talking about the third person, it's this person or thing that you're speaking about. So he, she, it, or they. Now in Spanish, I'm sure you've heard of this before, but this is something we really need to dig into. The word for you can be either familiar or formal. This is a huge difference than the word you in English. So in English, you is you, and we only have one version of it. In Spanish, you're going to have one word for you when you're talking to someone like your child or your best friend or your brother, and you're going to use a different form of you when you want to be a little bit more formal. So in a work setting, you should almost always use the formal version of you. If you are working in a healthcare setting, you're a nurse, doctor, receptionist, you should almost always use the formal version, unless you're speaking to a child. So it's all about respect. So in Spanish, respect is very important. So if you use the wrong form of you, it is shown as a form of disrespect. However, if you are brand new to Spanish and you're trying your hardest, I'm sure you're not going to offend anyone because they know that you're learning Spanish. But once you become more fluent, you are going to want to pay attention and try to use the formal you as much as possible when it's appropriate. So for the word you in Spanish, in the singular version, you have tú, which should have an accent on that you there, I'm sorry. Singular familiar version is tú. The singular formal version of you is usted. When do we use each? As we mentioned, if you are speaking with a child or your best friend or your brother or someone that you are very close with, it's okay to use tú. If you are speaking with maybe a colleague that you don't know very well, you're speaking with a professor, someone in a professional setting, if you are at work, you should almost always use usted. Unless it's a child, then it's okay to use tú. So if you want to be on the safe side, it is okay to always try and use usted. And then if someone says, hey, it's okay to loosen up, please use the tú form, then you can always switch over. But you always want to be, on the safe side versus offending someone. In the plural, the way that you would say tú in the plural, like you guys, would be vosotros if it's a male group or male and female mixed together. If it's all women, you would say vosotras. Now, the way to make usted plural is ustedes. Now, when to use each for these? This is a tricky one. So in Spain, they use vosotros and vosotras a lot. In Latin America, very few cultures or regions will still use vosotros or vosotras. So for the purposes of this course and the textbook that we are using, we are going to ignore all the forms of vosotros and vosotras. So for this course, Unless you are planning on going to Spain in the next month or so and you really, really want to learn vosotros, vosotras, we can just ignore that version. Just know that it exists, but we're going to focus on ustedes. Okay, so we're going to learn the forms for ustedes. Now, like I mentioned, it is always safer to try and use usted versus tú because then you won't offend anyone. So unless you're speaking with a child patient or a very, very close friend or family member, you should try and use the verb forms for usted. For vosotros versus vosotras or ustedes, we're going to use ustedes in this course. Now, this is an important note. In Spanish, the subject pronoun is not as important as in English. In English, you would never change the sentence, he is a doctor, to just is a doctor, because that wouldn't make sense. However, in Spanish, you could say, él es un doctor, or you could say, es un doctor. So we just add the L for extra emphasis so that we know who we're talking about, but it's not always necessary. So because the verb implies he is, the verb es, you don't necessarily need the subject pronoun in every Spanish sentence. A lot of times it's used to make it very clear who you're talking about in a sentence. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the verb ser, which means to be. We are going to mention it so that we can start conjugating it and get used to using it in this course. Now here's a chart about the verb ser. So first person, starting out top left, we're going to do yo soy, I am. Then tú eres, you are. Usted es, the formal you are. Él es, he is. Ella es, she is. Or just es, it is. Now in the plural, nosotros somos, we are. Second person plural, that's where vosotros would have been, but as we mentioned, we're going to ignore vosotros in this course since most of you will be interacting with Latin American patients versus Spanish patients, and so it's better just to ignore it at the moment to not confuse you further. So third person plural, if you wanted to say you all are, you would say ustedes son, or if you wanted to say they are, a group of males, you would say ellos son. If it was a group of females, you would say ellas son. Or if you just want to say they are, you would say son. Common uses of this verb. So this is probably at the beginning of learning Spanish what you will use the verb ser the most for, so it's important to learn this. So if you were ever talking about occupation, what someone does, you are going to need to know the forms of the word ser. So here's an example. Alejandra es doctora. Alejandra is a doctor. Origin. So where is someone from? Miguel es de Mexico. Nationality. Carolina es puertorriqueña. Religion. La señora Beltrán es católica. So origin, nationality, religion, all different ways to say, to be, the verb ser. So it's really important that we learn that. And I apologize, there are a few accents missing on this slide that I just noticed, so please don't go by the spelling of these words. Now, we have some vocab in this lesson. It's also in your book. If you want to refer to it in your book, it is on page 19 of your textbook, but here we have it in the. So I'm going to just say these words. If you could please repeat them if you're at home taking this course. Just repeat after me so you get used to speaking Spanish. El cirujano. La cirujana. El consejero. La consejera. El dentista. La dentista. El doctor. La doctora. Oh, another way of saying the same thing. El médico. La médica. El enfermero, la enfermera. El farmacéutica. Oh, sorry, I said the wrong one first. El farmacéuta, la farmacéuta. Or there's another way of saying the same word. El farmacéutico, la farmacéutica. El nutricionista, la nutricionista. El profesor, la profesora. El psicólogo, la psicóloga. El recepcionista, la recepcionista. El fisioterapeuta, la fisioterapeuta. Or another way to say the same thing. El terapeuta físico, la terapeuta física. El trabajador social, la trabajadora social. Or el asistente social, la asistente o asistenta social. It's just a list of different professions that you're going to come across working in the healthcare setting. I can imagine you could guess most of these, but if you need the English version, they are again on page 19, but I'll just go through them really quickly. So cirujano is a surgeon, consejero, counselor, dentista, dentist, doctor or médico is a doctor, enfermero is a nurse, farmacéuta is a pharmacist, nutricionista, nutritionist, profesor, professor, psicólogo, psychologist, recepcionista, receptionist, fisioterapeuta is a physical therapist, and trabajador social is a social worker. So that's all we're going to go over for today. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to speaking again soon.